Jill and Stacy Show.
It is 5:30. I will call the meeting to order. Today is a special meeting, which means we must strictly to the business at order. So topic A is discuss precincts line of voter numbers pursuant to the KRSs. I'll turn that over to Stacy a bit.
So we've talked about it in the past multiple times, and we figured since this is a non-election year, that it would be a good time for the board to take into consideration some of the options regarding precinct lines and numbers. There's KRSs that guide us on how to split up our precincts, how to establish a precinct boundaries. The KRSs noted in your agenda are specific to the amount of voters in each precinct. However, after a meeting with the State Board of Elections, it's been determined that this KRS is a little bit antiquated. So that KRS states that anytime you have an election where over 700 people show up to vote, that you need to reconsider your precinct numbers. And they explained to us that that was established prior to precincts having optical scanners. You know, when you filled out your ballot, put it in the machine, and hand counted later. So this is a very old KRS. So equipment is now capable of handling more than 700 voters. So we don't have to strictly adhere to that number, but you can consider it, considering some of our precincts are disproportionate. It doesn't really affect voter or election turnout or votes because they all vote for commissioners, they all vote for the state reps in their areas. It's just a matter of how many people show up to vote in one location, pretty much. So our planning and commission is willing to work on a precinct restructuring project for us if the board chooses to do that. So if the board wants to consider reducing numbers of voters in each precinct, then they can draw up a few scenarios like they did when we did redistricting, give us a couple options to choose from. If we choose to do that, we do need to keep in mind that according to the last election, these are estimated numbers that I have, 32 of our precincts were over the 700 turnout.
Are these the ones?
No, I'll go over those here in a second. Which, to keep in mind that if we're going to restructure, that would most likely cause us to have more precincts. So that leads to a trickle down of issues that go with that, which we'll get into some of that as well.
Combined precincts or single?
Single. So
You would be adding more if we made the numbers.
So for example, like the precinct Beaver had 1,129 people show up to vote. If you chose to split that precinct into two different precincts, you now have one extra more precinct than you did before. So in all actuality, looking at the precincts and the numbers, we will end up with more precincts.
It would be impossible not to.
It would be impossible not to have more precincts. So if the board chooses to do that, the planning commission is willing to work with us to help, because without them, it's something we wouldn't be able to do on our own.
They can draw up different scenarios in mapping.
So we would like to have, we've already spoken to them about it a little bit. They went on a Teams meeting with us with the state board to get an idea of what the state board is looking for us to have. And so we just need to meet with them further and discuss that option. If that's something, even if it's not something you choose to do, they can prepare it so we can see it, what it looks like, what it would mean for us. And
So down the line, when they do the scenarios, we would call a special meeting. There's nothing to vote on. We're just saying they will do that for us and we can review it for later.
from that point.
Good idea.
And again, with that will come several other issues that we would need to address, but we'll get into that here in a second.
So then B was discussed City of Union resolution that was sent to your attention of the Board of Elections.
And everyone got that in an email?
Did you get that?
I did provide it for you as well here. Seeing as how we were already discussing changes to our precincts in the past, we're already addressing some of the issues they wanted us to address.
Right.
So item 1 on the resolution, they would like us to create exclusive precincts for residents of the City of Union and designate separate voting facilities or locations specifically for those city voters. We have 3 cities. All the cities have splits where some of the precinct is in the city, some is not, and that's the issue we run into. Just about every county with a city has that issue. We've talked to the State Board of Elections, and according to them, it's virtually impossible to not have splits. We may be able to reduce the number of splits we have, get rid of locations that have no voters in them, like Airport D and Florence 15 Union doesn't have any residents in that little area. We can do that. But to absolutely only have city voters in one precinct, it's virtually impossible because the city incorporates new properties into the city limits all the time. Anytime they annex, we would have to redraw our precinct lines. And that's not a feasible option to completely isolate city voters into one precinct, two precincts, whatever the case may be. So we realize the issue. We realize there is a problem, but it's a statewide problem, not just our problem. Every county has that issue with splits. You're always going to have them. School boards, state senate lines, representative lines, all of that's impacted by precinct lines as well. You can't cross a line. You have to be complete inclusive of. Yeah. So those all cause issues with redrawing just to include a city. Okay. So item 2, again, something we've already discussed. It's already in the works, having ballot printers at all locations. As we previously discussed, we purchased before the last election 20 printers. But as you're well aware, we don't have the space to store them, nor the means to program them on site because of the storage issues. We currently own 46 printers. In the last election, we used 26, and we have 20 in storage. To have printers at every location that we currently have, we would need an additional 20 more printers, and the cost of that is
20 more printers will be about $135,000 to equip all voting precincts with ballot print on demand.
And have a few to spare. It is a very expensive endeavor. So then you need to keep in mind, if we redo our precincts and we have more precincts, more locations means more equipment, more need for space to store it, which we do not have. So again, it's a trickle-down
Again, nothing
process.
to vote on today, something to consider.
Just information for you to have.
If you're wanting to eliminate poll worker human error and have ballot printers, you're going to at least need 20 more at that price, as well as a new facility to store them in. Again, something to consider. We will probably just request a price quote definitively. We're not buying, we're not doing anything, we can't do anything while everybody's vote, but just to have it for one of our next meetings for you all to consider and think about. But we wanted to inform you that's an option, not that we like or don't like at this point, but just throwing out, because the Union City was suggesting to the ballot printers to print on demands.
Which I love that. I want that. We've always wanted that. It just makes it easier.
But it does, as she says, have a serious trickle-down effect.
The storage facility has to be super secure, right?
Yes.
Temperature controlled,
Temperature
secured,
controlled,
under
cameras. That's why I say it is.
Preferably something we can easily access, because again, as you're aware, it takes us months to prepare for an election, to get each precinct ready to go. It takes a lot of work and effort, and I can't not be near the facility and would send my staff there. So it's just a lot to think about. We've already been in discussion with the Fiscal Court about space and the possibility of moving and things like that, but there's nothing definitive as far as that goes at this point. So things to keep in mind if we restructure our precincts and the board decides to do that, again, your decision. If we decide to go with ballot printers at all the current locations, I just wanted to give you guys some monetary information. I don't think we've ever really talked about how much it costs for us to run an election. So in addition to the additional $135,000 we would need to purchase that equipment for 47 locations, I just wanted to give you a rundown of some costs that we already incur per election. Something to think about. Do we want to increase the cost to the taxpayer of how much it costs to run an election, or do we want to be more efficient about that? So from July to January of last year, 2024, for one election, so that's for the general election, we spent roughly $246,000 to run our 47 precincts. That does not include the cost of voter registration staff, items purchased with the 2024 budget, any grant money that we used to purchase equipment, daily office supplies, any kind of fees we incur, copy expenses. It doesn't include any of that. That's just for the equipment we use, the tablets, the scanners, the printers that we already have, supplies for the machines and tablets, the toolboxes, the Franklin stands, the cardboard dividers, all those kinds of things.
Anything reimbursed by the state? Grants or anything like that they help subsidize?
The state will reimburse some of the staffing costs, and that goes straight to the fiscal court. So, but it's not 100%. And we do get a per voter, it's like 25 cents of registered voter. Again, that goes straight to the fiscal court. So it's not a figure that I see or that I'm aware of. So it's not something I could quote.
So what do we pay total for our staff?
The poll workers. So this past election, just the general election, was $58,000 just for poll workers. 58. To set the machines and machine maintenance was nearly $96,000. And that's just for the equipment we currently have, so then you need to consider if we're adding equipment. The poll pads, the internet costs and the maintenance of those, almost $15,000. Postage for absentee ballots, just for the general election was nearly $6,000 just to send out absentee ballots. Moving costs, so we have to pay a mover. We use 2 moving trucks to move equipment. It costs us per year roughly $19,000 for 4 days of moving. 2 one election, 2 for the other, 2 moving trucks, and those trucks are packed full. And I broke that moving cost down to roughly $400 per location that we pay. And then we have location payout. We pay some of the locations, like the churches, for using their facility. That's $2,000 a year. Even though we have poll pads, we have to print the precinct rosters just in case something goes wrong. That's another $1,600 per election. We pay storage fees as it is for a small building across the street. That's $675 a month to store our long-term things and some of our equipment that's not susceptible to cold and heat. These are just a few of the things I was able to break down of that $246,000. That's what we're spending some of the monies on. I didn't break down everything that we spend the money on because in my
It gives you a good
spreadsheets
ballpark
I can't
idea.
see everything. So just so you have an idea, the bigger items that we have to run the election, the equipment, the supplies,
246 was for the general.
just for the general,
not the primary.
not the primary.
Primary was what happened?
Not quite as much, but still over
It's
200,000.
chunky.
Still over 200.
Yes.
Okay.
We would still have the same number of poll workers, the cost for that, in the primary,
And
right?
it was a few less. We had more in the general than we did the primary. I think it was like 53,000 for the primary, somewhere around there, 53 to 55,000. So it was a little less, but not much.
To run an election, whether a huge presidential or a small county, they're similar. It's just slightly less because you still have to have the same amount of precincts and the same amount of everything. So I mean, the machines are the same. You know what I mean? So that number of precincts has that number of machines. So I mean, it's just that tick
Oh,
less.
that's
But
what
you're
I-
talking basically the same amount.
And then along the lines of turnout, we pay the same amount no matter how many voters show up. So things for us to consider are locations that don't have very many voters show up. And I have 4 that I've given you a spreadsheet for. I'm only able to track the cycles that I've been in this department, so the last 3 years. There are 4 different locations that overall, the May primary, most of which had less than 250 voters show up on election day. Some of them had as little as 28 to 24 voters show up in a May primary. So you're paying a poll worker for 12 hours to facilitate the voting for 28 people in those small locations. It's just one of the examples, and that's in a primary. In the November election, for example, at the Ralph Rush Center, on election day, we had 28 show up for the primary. On election day in November at the Ralph Rush Center, we had 121 people show up to vote at that location. So we need to consider large locations, and we need to consider large locations where the turnout is not as large if and when you choose to redesign our precincts. So
It's just the food for thought.
yeah, more information to.
We're just trying to give you as much information as we can going forward to the next meetings.
So these 4 are just picked randomly or based on these?
No, based on the turnout numbers. So I went back to every election and I looked at the turnout for those precincts, and that is the number of people that showed up. The white column is the total number of voters, and then you have the column after that is how many voted, whether that was absentee, election.
Like that's how many people are registered to vote. That's
Right.
like 1,290 people are registered at the Rush Center. 28 actually showed up to vote.
On election day. The other number is absentee early
Yes.
vote.
Okay.
But on election day, of the 1,290, 28 show up.
That's it.
Yes.
Yes. That entire 12-hour day, 28 people showed up to vote.
It's Florence Elementary School. I don't know if you know the Ralph Rush. That's Florence Elementary School.
Was
I think we
it
have somebody
less than the?
So that was the primary.
That's a primary. This is a general.
And that's the
Okay.
general for that year.
General,
Yes,
primary,
yes.
general.
Okay,
So
I
even
got
if
you. They
you-
all say election day.
Yeah, so I did
121, you get
May and November, May, November,
Okay.
May, November. So I did those 4 locations were the smallest.
1%.
1% showed up on the general, not even the primary. It's
Yeah.
0.3.
0.2.
Yeah, so consistently over those 3 years, I looked at all locations and their turnout. Consistently over those 3 years, those had the lowest turnout.
Consider easy enough to put into another precinct.
Yeah, it's-
If that's what you
that's
choose
up
to do, absolutely, yes.
I mean, a lot of this is going to fall on the plate of, do you want Some of them, if GIS maps it out, they're gonna give us scenarios. You can add precincts, you can not add precincts. We're just bringing it up for any reasons. We're also bringing it up to let you know if we do ballot printers at each location, how much they will be. We're just trying, we can stay the exact same. We can do everything the exact same. And we're just giving you scenarios of what's out there and what will come forward in the future to vote on. So you're well informed ahead of time of what we're dealing with.
So there are several options,
Yes.
like you said, you stay the same, or we consider merging precincts, or we consider,
Staying the same and adding ballot printers at every location. I mean, these are options for you to think about, talk about.
It's a single printer.
one single printer. I do have that information, thank you for asking.
But we wanted to keep you informed as humanly possible of every scenario. That's why the board votes.
So Bill asked how much a printer costs. Just for the printer alone, not the supplies that go with it,
Or
not
the stand.
not the cart that it sits on, the V drive, the bag we put it in, none of that. Just the printer is $6,220. The printer, according to our vendor, has a life expectancy of 3 to 5 years. So basically one election cycle, 3-year cycle.
So if we were to put a new printer in the Ralph Roush Center for primary election, that would be $6,220.
$6,220.
How many poll workers?
4
And so that's how much for the poll workers for that day.
4 times 225.
So
That's
$1,000.
Yeah.
And then $400 to set it up and close it down. So 66, about close to $8,000.
Not counting supplies and
Correct.
ings that we need.
So
for that
roughly
precinct.
$8,000, but that's one-time cost.
Right.
Yes.
But it's costing $1,500 to have 24 people show up.
Yes. Yeah, whether one
Plus the
person
cost of
comes
that
or
printer.
6,000 people come, it's the same cost to run the election.
So the Rush Center does not have a printer?
No, currently it does not. None of these locations
No.
have a printer at this point.
We will need at least 20 to have ballot printers at each location.
So if you divided that 6,226, let's just say you got 5 years out of it, that's 2 elections, that's 10, so it's about $620 an election if you were to rough it.
Yes.
So about $2,000 per election to have 24 people show up.
As I said, food for thought.
And that's not all the other costs you got.
No.
That's just the
Right.
printer. That doesn't include all the,
Well, that's printer setup and workers.
Yeah.
There's other costs
Yes.
that go into that.
And the moving, yes, and so, yeah.
Okay, then would we have to consider, since they don't have one, and, we don't know what's going to happen there, but do we have to consider, is 2 the max that will go to any high-numbered polling place?
are you saying ballot printers?
Yes.
We would send 2 to the large ones, yes.
At
One,
this point, that's what we have. We've had several large precincts ask for more ballot printers,
If you-
which would be ideal because if you have 4,000 people show up to vote, you want to make sure if one of them fails that you have the backup for that purpose. So there's always that too.
1,012 hours is a couple of hours.
It is a lot of printing,
A lot of
yes.
printing.
Yeah.
So-
And the more printers you have, the more efficient you'll be. The lines, yes.
but if you want more than 2 or 1 at each location, that number of 20 goes that way.
Well, some of our locations, like the Consolidated,
Yeah.
some of them have 2 printers already. But a few of them, we'd consider, like Pleasant Valley, I can't think of the name of the church.
That church up on the
right
hill,
now.
like Culver's, I'll call it, I don't know.
She was assigned 2 printers and we sent a 3rd on election day, just to make us feel better. So
How many do you set up for early vote?
we have, at each location, there are 3 to 4 printers for early voting at each
And
location.
those lines moved relatively quickly.
Yeah, early vote, no one waited more than an hour.
Most days.
And we saw in 3 days, we saw over 17,000 people.
How many ballot issues?
None,
None.
0.
And I can tell you, for some of us who went and stood in the rain, 15 minutes in and out because of the aid, not the big one.
The ad
The ad
district.
district.
The ad district was just, you went in, you voted.
It was very efficient, it ran very well. Both facilities, parking was,
But,
both facilities ran very well. So that's a credit to a vote center.
yeah,
Something else
yeah.
to throw out there.
So you're going to have those numbers.
Yes.
I mean, once we have potential precincts, then you'll be able to put together projected costs.
Yes, we would have to get the mapping to see precincts, the board can decide on precincts more or less, then you have to decide on ballot. But like I said, we're just informing, but it
Yeah.
kind of does step by step is how we're doing it. But we want to give as much information as possible.
And it was important to get this information out as soon as possible because if we're going to make changes to our precincts,
We gotta get it done.
we have to get it done before the filing for candidacy begins on November the 5th of this year.
So we're trying to get a good jump.
So,
Because the state board has to approve the plan.
yes.
And they had 60 days, was it 60 days for them to issue approval?
I think it's, they're usually.
Once we submit it, but we have to submit it in January of the election year. So that will give us plenty of time to create a plan, change our precinct boundaries if need be. If we create more precincts, we have to name them, we have to give them a code, there's processes. If we decide to keep it as it is,
But then, if you have to purchase more equipment, we gotta bid it.
yes.
We
Well,
gotta-
No.
we don't have to bid equipment in the elections department because there aren't hardly any vendors that do that, so it's been
There's basically two and the county chooses, so you have to go
with your
that
vendor, so.
But you still have to put a purchase order in and they have
Correct.
to
Yes,
deliver.
yes. That's,
Before a May primary,
Right,
yes.
right.
because we will have primaries in 26.
Yes.
Yes. So, it's a big project, it's a lot to consider and think about how we want to proceed for this next election cycle, to avoid issues that we've had in the past.
The budget for such purchases, would that have to be approved for the July
July.
1 budget?
The July 1 budget
So
through the fiscal court.
Under an even shorter deadline?
Yes, but we know that. GIS and the planning and zoning is already on.
No, I understand it, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying, you're
Yes.
talking about November as a deadline for submitting precincts, but if you're going to expand precincts
Correct.
and have to purchase more equipment, you have to get that in, and the budget's due to the fiscal court the beginning of May?
Say that again?
Budget due to fiscal court the beginning of May?
I think so.
So you've got a short time if you need
Yes.
extra money for an election in May of 26.
Yes, you are correct.
Again, expansion isn't the only option, there are several that you can,
Yeah, I mean, I boil it down to stay exactly the same, ballot printers every location, mergers, they're all options. But if we're going to submit, as Bill said, to the fiscal court, if we're getting hypothetically get more, then the fiscal court is going to have to come up with more.
I really feel like we want to do what's fiscally responsible and what is advantageous to all voters in the county at this point. We need to consider all voters.
So basically, we will have the mappings, and we will end up probably calling another special meeting. We will have to call special, because the regularly scheduled next meeting would have been July 8th, but clearly we have to have one before that. So we will have to have a special,
Well, how long did it take them to get their bill set up for us?
was it 3 or 6?
The planning,
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be that long. It's just a matter of sitting down with them, and they have to get our voter rolls so they can map it all out. And like when James did it for us with redistricting, he was really quick about it. And John is taking his place. He's really good about
He's very good.
getting back with us. If you want to be involved in it, we're happy to.
Because they kind of, you've seen them how they do the maps when you all sat, they can
Um,
merge and twist.
I believe that would probably be a special meeting if they're involved.
If you're involved, we can vote with you, you have to. So it'd be a special for
I don't,
that.
I don't know how
Well,
that
but as I
works,
understood our
GIS.
meeting, I mean, they would put together a proposal.
Yes,
Right.
You could.
they did that last
You
time.
could say, we don't like this precinct having this many voters next to this one. I
That's what
think
we did with the.
And, yeah, he gave us several
Redistrict.
options.
Remember, he gave.
So that's the point
multiple.
where you would be involved,
That's where I-
choosing the
yeah, that's
option,
fine.
yes.
Yes,
Okay.
but you'll be involved that way, yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
They'll just probably give a myriad of options, what you like or don't like, and they can tweak. If you like that one the most, but you still want to do that, yes, you could do that.
Okay.
You can do it on the fly.
And with regard to the union resolution, number one, as Stacy mentioned, we've got 3 cities, and adjusting precincts so that they're city exclusive could end up impacting surrounding precincts as well. And we do, even though the numbers, we still have to try and come up with comparable numbers throughout the precincts. So we're juggling a lot of different things, trying to respond to the City of Union's request here.
So City of Union doesn't have county ballots?
They do.
I know they
Oh,
do,
this-
but
If-
would they,
If-
I mean, according,
If-
I'm not sure how to
If we
read that.
split things the way they would like us to and only have city voters in a precinct,
Right,
then they would not have a county ballot. It would be, it would have county elections on it, races, but it would also have the city on it as
so
well.
it would be the same ballot.
Right.
We wouldn't be
Right.
pulling
Yeah.
separate ones out.
And,
That's assuming
Right.
that the school districts line up.
right.
And the state election lines line up.
And then there's that
Which
as
they
well.
really don't.
Your
So,
request is impossible.
right, because the city unions,
It's just impossible.
some of it may fall on a different state rep line. And so you'd have those 2 ballots, or a different
I see.
school board line. So you may still have multiple ballots within the city.
Okay.
So the request for exclusive precincts isn't necessarily to the voter, but it's to the ballot.
Yes.
They would like, if you read, based upon what happened in November and what's been going on, the issue was two ballots being distributed within one precinct.
Right.
We can probably draw up precinct boundaries that were exclusive to residents of the City of Union, but ensuring that we don't have multiple ballots within a precinct is going to be the difficult part because of federal, state elections, state
School board.
school board, city and county ballots. It's
Just
just,
have that kind of privilege.
yeah. So in response to their number one, really the request is for distinct ballots. And even if we draw up the change precinct boundaries, it's not going to guarantee we're not going to have separate ballots. But if we go to the scanners, then
You mean the ballot printer?
the
Ballot
ballot printers,
printer.
then you won't be distributing separate paper ballots,
Yeah,
which
you
would have
just use the
avoided
scan
the
gun
issue,
to scan the receipt and
The
the
way
printer
early voting
automatically
works, it
prints.
triggers directly from your ID.
which would have avoided the issue that came up in Union.
Right.
But we did not have that available. We didn't have enough, and we left out the City of Union. But we can fix number one, basically, if we have on-demand printers.
Yes.
That all Union.
Yeah, so number 2 takes care of number 1, which was, again, already in the works. It's just a matter of storage
And funding.
and funding. And we've had multiple discussions about it in the office and whatnot. Again, we do have those 20 printers we already own. We just don't have a place to store them here on site. So they're out there, we just can't use them.
We need
In
a
the cloud or something.
They're actually in a storage facility with Harp, our vendor,
Okay.
are storing them for us in, are they in
Charge us.
Frankfurt or Louisville?
They're in Louisville.
They're actually being very nice and they're not.
They're not?
They're not.
They're not charging us to store them.
All right.
So
But
it's-
again, they're sitting on a shelf.
you know,
And they're not items, we talked about this, these aren't items that we can build shelves and just slide them on, because they're stands and the
You've seen
printers.
them.
So
they're bigger than the podium.
we can't just build a bunch of shelves like they're little printers that we've got in our offices. So we need a large facility to store however many machines under all of those requirements that you mentioned. And then that's not an item that's been budgeted, and so we gotta get that.
Even for our 20, say we decide to stay in the status quo, we still have that 20 hanging out there, and if we buy more, the 20 have no facility to store them under camera, under climate control, under lighting, under security. So that needs to be, we have those, or that has to be, but if you're adding more, you're going to need a larger facility. But even if not, you know what I mean?
Which, that problem is gonna have to be resolved.
Yes.
No matter what we do with precinct boundaries.
Yeah.
We've gotta find storage for these extra machines. They can't stick in Louisville, because at some point, as you said, they've gotta be set up and prepared for the election, and they can't do that down in Louisville, because we have to do that for public inspection. So we're gonna have to have a place for these machines for the public inspection before the primary in May. So
Again,
it's-
for consideration, do we increase, do we decrease, do we stay the same?
So, I mean, it's simple, it seems simple to simply say, redraw the precincts, have all voters from the City of Union in it, buy machines so that they're available, but then we have to store, support, et cetera. And we've been trying, Stacy and Justin, we've talked on multiple occasions, trying to work through each of these issues. So number 3, implementation timeline. Are we going to meet a May budget deficit deadline for the county fiscal court? Are we meeting a November deadline for the Board of Elections? We know we've got a deadline before the May primary. So when we thought we were going to take the year off in 2025, you may be having a lot of special meetings as we clear each of these hurdles, because ultimately, you as the Board of Elections are going to be making the decisions on purchasing and precinct boundaries.
Finding your facility for storage, how does that county work with that? How's the county work with what department?
It'll be the fiscal court. It would have to be the fiscal court. The fiscal court would be the funding of the rental of a facility or the purchase of a facility.
Who gets to find or build it or whatever?
I've actually, we've been researching places for lease, places for rent, places for purchase. Trust me, nobody wants more space than my staff, and so we've been looking.
But it will ultimately be the fiscal court's
Yeah.
call.
You'll have a budget meeting.
Yes.
And there's already line items that are budgeted. We'll probably have to add some line items and make increased requests from the fiscal court beyond what our current budget is. Which then gets, they do that in a caucus. The fiscal court reviews the budget, approves or disapproves.
So once we get with planning and they are able to make this plan, then we can send out an email to set up a special meeting to look at their plan, and then we can go from there. And hopefully that will be within the next month or 2 at the most. depending on their timeline, because we are at their mercy. Do you have any more questions for me?
Questions? No, I think that covers A, B, and C.
Covered it. Informative.
There's a lot that goes into it behind the scenes that we don't necessarily discuss at meetings because we don't necessarily have to, it just happens, so.
Anything else? Because we stuck to the top. That's all. 1, 2, 3 on the agenda. I make the motion, we adjourn the agenda, adjourn the meeting.
Do we have a date for our next meeting? Did you?
We'll have to
No,
send out an
it'll be a
email.
special meeting.
Yeah, it'll be a special.
For July.
Right. We'll have to do one before July
Okay.
to meet deadlines, yes.
Give me, do I?
I made the motion.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 3-0. We just had to do that first because it had to be on the agenda. I saw you.
Chris McLaughlin, Hebron, I just have a question. The only cost I didn't hear is how much are the paper ballots that the precincts who don't have printers cost?
I have that.
It
Just a
will
second.
vary, obviously.
It does. So this past election, we ordered it for 80% turnout at every precinct. Paper ballots cost us $22,300.
So significantly less than machines.
Yeah.
Yes and no. Over time, the machine pays for itself. We use less paper. Those printed ballots that we don't use, I have to recycle them, and every time it just hurts my heart to have to spend $22,000 on paper that we didn't use, and then we gotta shred it. So it's a balance. So.
Duh.
Justin, I have a couple questions if you're taking questions.
Well, yes.
It's off the record because the meeting's over.
Or if you want, do you want, I mean, you can,
I mean, that's up to Justin.
yeah.
We need to stick around.
Y'all can go.
Okay.
Y'all,
I mean, you can ask Justin questions.
you guys, yeah, because on a special meeting, we can't stick to the agenda.
That's fine.
Our meeting's closed, so.
Yeah, that's fine. I just have questions since we're talking about it and she's got all the data.
Okay.
Because did I hear correctly that the ballot printers cost $6,000 a piece with a 3 to 5 year life expectancy?
Yeah.
That was correct.
Just
So-
for the printer, nothing else.
And the printer is only printing ballots. Each individual printer is only printing ballots for 6 elections during that, 6, maybe 8 elections during that
Yeah.
period of
The
time.
math wizard, yeah, I mean, you can do the math.
So according to our,
Those 5 years is 10 elections.
yeah, according to our vendor, he says, quote, I would say closer to 5 years since you won't be using them every 4th year. Like this
Because
year's a
an
non-election
non-cycle
year.
year.
So,
So you get 4.
you may
Are we
get,
replacing our printers every 3
we
to
have
5
yet to
years?
replace any. We've only been using them since 2023, 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't replaced any yet. We haven't had any real major issues with any of the printers, so I feel confident that I think they might last longer. But he says what usually the reports he hears are the drums and the fusers going out.
It also depends how many you print. Think about
Right,
it. You know,
if
some
you're
of
at a
them
big
might last
location.
longer. Yeah, big location versus tiny
I'm just
location. You
sitting
have
here
24
thinking
voters, how many print out?
A printer from Walmart will print more pages than what you're describing right now at a much lower cost. I'm mind blown.
These are just Brother printers. It's the brand Brother. It's not a special,
But it costs
Those are
$6,000.
expensive years for many other.
I don't know what makes them special. I don't know why they
We
cost
can inquire
$6,000.
because
I
we have to
can
buy,
ask.
as you know, with contracts, there's only 2 vendors in the entire state that are certified to be voting, but you know what I mean?
And we're sitting here, one of the problems, or one of the things that we're talking about in this whole discussion was
It has to be compatible.
benefit to the taxpayer.
Okay.
If this is a problem in our county, it's a problem in every county. And I'm sitting here thinking, that is a ludicrous amount of money to spend.
It is a lot of money, but you also have to think that printer has to be compatible with the machine that we're using that has all the ballot information in it. It's called a Verity print. So that Verity print has the scanner gun that attaches to it, has all the ballot information in it, and
I work in technology, I'm telling you, that's a simple
I can
solution.
ask
It's a
the vendors
ludicrous-
why
Well, that's true.
the handgun or the Verity.
I mean, it wouldn't hurt to say to a vendor, justify.
Justify your amount.
That Verity
You
print
could buy commercially.
includes the
versus
Verity print that has the ballot in it and the printer. It's not just, I'm sorry, it's just not the printer alone. It's the Verity print and the printer package.
Yeah, and I'm,
So the 2 pieces of equipment, no, that's extra.
I'm not arguing,
Yeah.
for or against any of the equipment. I'm just
Yeah.
sitting here saying from a.
The number-wise.
The numbers
So I
don't seem to
imagine
add up
most of
there.
that cost is in that Verity print machine
Not
from
the actual
Hart,
printer.
not the actual printer.
Well, we can ask them.
I feel like we should ask them to
cost.
justify their cost.
Justify the cost.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
other question I had for you was am I correct in understanding that the problem that we're trying to solve through all of this discussion is avoiding having 2 different ballots getting handed out in split precincts?
Some.
That was the issue that Union raised.
Of the 3, that was topic B.
That was
Right,
correct.
because all the solutions that you guys talked about, all the different variables that I was jotting down here are extremely heavy lifts. I mean, we're talking about big money, real heavy lift projects. So I'm wondering, basically, if we've not had this problem before, What is the real problem that we're trying to solve?
It's not only the Union City issue, it was the number of voters per precinct. We have to even that out more. We can't just have 28 show up at one location and
There's
1,500 at
guys,
another.
there's 2,000 and some at 20 and some.
So that was part of the issue,
Yeah,
is
but the number
evening
of
out the
voters that show
numbers.
up is different than number of voters in the district, because theoretically,
Correct.
all of them show up one
Theoretically,
year.
yes, but we do have uneven numbers of registered voters per precinct, and we are trying to even that out.
I thought we just did
If
that,
the
didn't we just
That's
redraw it?
redistricting in the commissioner districts.
The one thing we can't forget
I
is
thought we
that
did it after the,
After the census, that was the,
That's
that was the
redistricting.
redistricting, that didn't change the
This
precincts.
is precinct establishment.
They are too.
So certain precincts got moved into different districts, but we didn't change the precinct.
Or how many voters are in the precinct.
So we balanced out.
That's a population shift.
yeah, how many split precincts do we have
I don't have the number in front of
between
me.
cities and counties? That's what
you
I'm
mean double precincts.
There's, I want to say anywhere from 16 to 20.
I was just say 17 to you think
Yeah.
19, but let's, how about this, 17 to 19, there we go.
So around 20-ish or less, we have
Yeah.
precincts that have both city and
There's
non-city.
Yes.
precinct and
Or in the case of
47
Walton, city, not city, Walton graded school district, not Walton graded school district, Kenton County School District.
Yep.
So-
But if we, how many printers do we say we have?
We have
Total?
20.
20.
So, Commissioner,
Yes.
just because it's a split precinct, Stacy said there are more than 20 precincts where we turn out multiple ballots.
Because of school districts.
The school districts throw it out
Like
too.
Beaver, for example, is split because of the school district. Some go to Walton, some go to Boone.
26.
So if we're
So it's impossible.
passing out paper ballots, there are more than just the split precincts where multiple ballots are being distributed.
That's the number I was looking for.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so the
I can
human
look that up.
error that everyone's talking about at Union was because there were two sets of ballots to be distributed. So we have more than 20 precincts where human error is a potential or possibility because of multiple ballots.
And this is the first time this has really happened.
But it's the first time that we're aware of.
I would just want to be concerned about, and I'm gonna label it an extreme reaction. I'm not saying it is necessarily, but I would be concerned about a very costly, manpower-intensive, extreme reaction to something that might be more of a simple problem. Human error is a simple problem.
It's not if you have to have poll workers and have to have as many locations that we have and barely enough people to staff them and poll workers that don't pay attention during training, all the factors that factor into that, human error. And this was something we were already considering, ballot printers at every location. I said it in training, I hope to have this. And we talked about it and talked about it, we just haven't implemented it yet
It may
because
be,
of the
it may be
cost.
the solution, but I'd like to see, especially if they come to the fiscal court with any sort of money request, I'd like to see a clear correlation between this technology solution and this human error, concern.
I mean, it might not ever happen again. It could happen
technology.
it could happen at
Yeah.
every election. I mean, we're all human. It could happen,
Yeah.
you hope and pray, right? It never does, but I mean, it could never happen for 50 years. It could happen the very next one.
And the
Well, it takes
technology-
one person to go, oops.
Right, and the technology isn't only solving that problem, it's solving over time cost issues. We can make an election more cost efficient if we have ballot printers, if we have less locations, if. So the technology is not to solve
But-
the human error problem.
But I do think if we can get number crunch down is never a bad thing. To specifically spell out why,
Right.
what we're getting for the price, why is it justified, why is it not justified? Show me exactly what you're getting. It's never bad. I don't care if you're buying a car or buying a ballot printer, right?
Well, I think the scenario of, like you already mentioned, that we only have one or two vendors that we can even deal with. They got us, bent over on the price, and we get screwed.
It's a government agency issue.
They're certified, we don't even really have a choice. The State Board of Elections certifies there's only two.
Yeah.
Add something. I had a friend when people were asking me about this, and I told them in my limited knowledge, I tried to explain it. One woman stood up, she was one of my poll workers, and she said, "Oh, it just didn't happen there." And I just wanted to stab myself in the heart, like, don't make this anymore. And I said, well, what did you do? And she said, well, the voter caught it, and we spoiled the ballot. That is a voter who was paying attention at another precinct where they're set like this and caught it. So it does happen at other places. It's up to the voter or the poll worker if they don't catch it. But I put some of it on the voter. Look at the ballot you've got.
We have an uneducated community.
When the clerk checks in, right, if they check their ID and it pops up, wouldn't it designate
It does.
It
It
does.
100% does.
Just brings out on the.
It does.
100% does. They get a ticket.
Yeah.
So that human error involved not looking at the receipt.
failure
Was this a
on the co-worker's
vulnerability that you guys flagged in your training?
Oh, yes.
Oh, absolutely.
So was there
I didn't
an
hear it.
actual clerk working at these vulnerabilities? Because I've had a clerk work at mine.
That we
Like
don't,
a deputy county
we don't
clerk?
have,
No,
we
not
don't
at
even
every
remotely
location.
have enough clerks. We can send,
I just think that if that was a vulnerability, you would have made sure that one was covered.
yeah, it's covered in training.
No, a clerk
Yeah,
overseeing that.
we basically
Yeah.
only can send out of the maybe 20 clerks. That's all we can send out because we don't have the manpower staff.
Well, if we have 20 that are possible or 19, then that's one per.
But we also have the combined precincts.
I think he's saying 47 locations. We don't have
Yes.
enough to keep one at every location.
Yeah, so.
And we try to put them at all the consolidated locations and ones where, like Walton, I think we had somebody there half a day because they have 4 or 5 ballots. So we try to think of all the scenarios, but still happens.
So more money maybe into training and special employees for elections, maybe more cost
It would be
efficient.
more cost.
This is just
Can I ask you a
simple,
question?
so election workers, poll workers just not paying attention.
May I ask a question?
If it's part of the agenda, yeah.
So so you only have 20 ballots, and this kind of dovetails into what Commissioner Ham was asking. If you only have 20 ballot scanners, right? How did you allocate them to where they were going? And if you're going to buy some in the future, could you not buy a number that are, I guess, so you have some precincts say they have 5 ballots, okay? We're going to guarantee that if you have a precinct that has 5 or 6 different separate ballots, we're going to make sure that we allocate a scanner there to diminish the likelihood of human error because you get a printer, okay? So when you go and, I would just say that when you're redrawing the precincts, that you, like, if you could also take into account which precincts have the most number of ballots and then allocate your machines accordingly, because it sounds like in some places you may have a precinct that only has 1 ballot, you know, hopefully. But then you may have, you know, so they don't necessarily need a scanner because the likelihood of human error is very de minimis, whereas if you have a place like, that has 2 or 3 or 4 ballots.
5, 6, yeah.
5 or 6, those may be the places that you would allocate your scanners to, and you may not need to buy a scanner for every precinct, but just have them for places where you have a high number of those ballots. So I guess it would be, and I'm not like trying to create work, but I would be curious if I was doing like an audit of what happened, where did you allocate your machines? And in the future, if you're going to potentially ask the fiscal court for more money in the future, these are the precincts where there's an extreme likelihood of human error. There's 6 ballots. Fiscal court, we need 5 more machines to make sure to minimize the risk. Because really for the Board of Elections, as stewards of tax dollars, it's minimizing the risk of it happening again. Instead of having to just go spend $400,000 or $300,000 buying scanners. So, I mean, I would welcome a conversation to kind of, you know, I know we're less adversarial than we were a little bit ago. So I would welcome an opportunity to help, you know, and help give some advice or people that can come in and look at that to help you analyze your risk to make sure it doesn't happen.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously that'll be up to the board of the fiscal court, but I thank for your input.
Use your brain.